Dear listener, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws with East Forest podcast. I'm back. I did one last week and the week before. So see, it was every week, even though I said it was probably going to be every 2 weeks. But sometimes you just get inspired and want to put stuff out. And I'm always looking for interesting guests to have on this podcast. So if you have ideas, send them my way. info@eastforest.org. But I don't know. I just wanted to get another one out. I had this conversation with Alan Macy, who's someone that I met at Esalen. And he's a really cool guy. Very interesting, very sweet. And he's got some interesting art that interfaces with the human body and consciousness. And I think you'll find the conversation interesting in a lot of ways. So that will be today. But first, I just want to remind you that I'm coming to Colorado really soon. I'll be in Durango, Denver, and Grand Junction on November 8th, 10th, and 11th, respectively. And those are all places I haven't been to. Some ever. I've never played in Durango, I don't think. And it's been a while since I've been in Denver. In Grand Junction, I was there with Trevor Hall on the tour last fall. So really happy to be back. Please check those events out. I'm excited about all of them. And then right after that, we're going to be with Marissa Wepner at the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, California. And that's a retreat that still has some spaces left, November 16th through 18th. So that's the one just before Thanksgiving. And I've been talking about Esalen because I don't want you to miss out if you're thinking about this. It's such an incredible place. Imagine like rolling hills, just this most stunning manicured type gardens and trees and creeks running into the ocean. Everything's just hugging the cliffs of Big Sur, California, which is just south of the Bay Area there, or north of Los Angeles. And you can fly in if you're flying into SFO or San Jose, and there's a shuttle that can take you down there. This is just like a Friday to Sunday night retreat, so it's pretty quick turnaround. If you're looking for a little getaway, I can't recommend this highly enough, especially come on. You get to like sit in hot tubs, hot spring water, hovering above the ocean with all this marine life out there. And then in our downtime, we're going to be in a cozy room together, diving deep into East Forest music and exploring how we can explore that with our consciousness and our bodies, with Radha, aka Marissa Wepner, doing some yoga and some other meditation. And it's just going to be magic. We're going to just totally let go and dive in. It'll be a very restorative weekend. So you can learn more about that at eastforest.org/retreat. And there's info, and you can click on that Esalen site. They have all sorts of info about different pricing options that really just depends on where you want to stay there, which varies a lot. So I hope to see you there November 16th through 18th. If you have the time, the inclination, and some spare shekels, I think it will be worth it for your heart and for your mind. So big news that I've not talked about on the podcast before is the Ram Dass project. I felt so coy all these last weeks and months when I'm always like, oh, I've been working on this thing in the studio, or I'm working on a new project and I'll tell you more about it soon. And that's just because we were trying to get it together so we could announce it to you. And it was announced recently for those of you on the East Forest mailing list. We sent that out, and it's obviously very exciting. I went out there in June. I won't tell you the whole story now. We actually have a podcast in the future that's sort of like a debrief that I recorded right after I got back from going out to Maui to interview Ram Dass when everything was fresh in my head. And so that will give you by far the best picture of what that particular trip was like. But the album itself is going to be a full-length record that is basically new teachings from Ram Dass that I recorded in person, set to new East Forest music. And I think we got about 12 to 14 different little subjects. So they're all sort of micro teachings that, each one wanted a different kind of music. And I just really tried to serve the teaching that was coming through and write music that I thought would fit that best and honor his legacy and his wisdom. And I really couldn't be happier with it. We got Trevor Hall guesting, featuring on one of the tracks. And just today, actually, I got approval from Krishna Das on a mix I sent him. He sent me some tracks. And Both of those tracks will be coming out in January. So we're going to release it in 4 sections. And that's so we get some time to digest each of these chapters, as we're calling them, and dig into the topics a little deeper. We don't just need to throw it all out and then forget about it after a couple weeks. We want this to be a conversation that is not just between me and you, but between you and your community and you and yourself, and one that we empower you to get together and to listen to this stuff. And we can encourage you to have, maybe we can all have group events on the same night, and sort of like a live global meditation, and spur a new story being told and spur deeper conversations. And because we all know that Ram Dass, when he talks about any of these subjects like death or dark thoughts, the nature of soul, that he's got a lot more to say on it. And there's some deeper meaning and talks for you to dive into. And I want to be a catalyst, a nodal point, a nexus point for this stuff for all of us and for an entire new generation. Because his message is one of, it's very universal and not something that's very easy to argue with or be triggered by too many, buzzwords or new age words. It's kind of like things that telling people to love everyone and tell the truth as a methodology for living is pretty tough to argue with. So it's definitely something I can get behind. And it's been an honor to work with Ram Dass and the Love Serve Remember Foundation, everyone there, Raghu and the whole team, to put this together. So the first chapter is scheduled to come out in January of 2019. And if you get on our mailing list or just kind of stay on social media, you'll hear more about it if you want to be the first or even get early access to some of that stuff. But it's coming, man. Boy, is it coming. And it has definitely been the thing I've been working on the most lately. I've been in the studio a lot, doing a lot of mixing. Before that, a lot of writing. And I really wanted to share that process with you, but here I am. Here I'm sharing it. So Ram Dass East Forest Project is coming soon, and I'll give you more stories about how that unfolds as it unfolds. I'm actually standing in front of a painting we had commissioned. Elizabeth Hilton painted it, and she painted basically a portrait of Ram Dass, and out of his head, she's a mixed media artist, so she used bits of his books coming out of his head in rays. There are like all these words, and around his neck is a lei, like a Hawaiian lei of flowers, but it's actually green leaves. And his face is white bearded with kind of a multicolor on his skin with these beaming eyes. And this is going to be our front cover art. So that's something that we put in motion several months ago, and I'm sort of coincidentally set down my recording equipment just in front of it to record this, and he's staring at me. Hi, Ram Dass. Yeah, what a journey, man. What a trip. I'll tell you more about it soon. If you have any questions about it specifically, hit him my way. And on that note, don't forget, before we get into this, scroll down on the page there if you're on your iPhone, or if you're in Apple Podcasts, or wherever you are watching it. If there's a methodology to review this podcast, it means a lot, and it does a lot. Give it the 5-star review, and even better, type in a few sentences for a review online, because I read them, and they also make a big difference on other people, taking the leap to say, hey, I'm gonna check that out. I actually had one that I wanted to read. This was from Brooke Harrelson, 88, wrote a review that says, East Forest translates the intangible and abstract ideas of consciousness to practical, scientific, and inspirational ideas. He interviews highly credible and intellectual people and asks the questions that make us think. My favorite podcast yet. You see, it's nice to hear. Thank you very much, Brooke. But if I was digging through podcasts and I ran across that, it might make the difference for me to say, sure, I will. I'll give that a shot. Here's another one from Mola Magnet. Mola Magnet. Mola Magnet. 5 stars. Just discovered this and I'm enjoying the interviews in raw style, exploring the depth of lives and that live outside the mainstream and their influences. Thank you for the beautiful meditations, an added bonus with your music, expanding my consciousness. Well, I hope you did like the meditation last week. I try to do those when I get inspired, and I hope that once I have a whole bunch of them, we can put that into an album of itself, of just meditations. We're building a new story together, folks. Really appreciate you listening. So I think this is a good time to get into our conversation with Alan Macy, which is just about all this stuff exactly. So here it is. He was in a hot tub, by the way, when we do these on Zoom a lot, and so we're on video, so I can see him, and he's sitting there in his hot tub in Santa Barbara. So here we go, into the hot deep with Alan Macy. So where are you? Are you in a hot tub or a pool right now? Because I'm just trying to wrap my head around the mise en scène of this conversation.
I'm soaking in hot water.
This seems a little bit unfair. I am in the rain in the high desert of southern Utah right now, and there's actually snow falling up in the hills around me.
Well, I just came from snow. I was in Montana just before this. I just arrived in a couple of days ago, late at night. So I totally know the feeling, but I like the snow.
I like the snow too. It's just, when I see you on a video literally doing a podcast in a hot tub, I have to say that's definitely the way I could be doing this for sure. I should get my own hot tub. And I did one in a sauna once. That was nice, but... This is next level.
Trevor, I'd be happy to get out of it if that would make you feel better.
No, that'd make me feel terrible. You should definitely enjoy it. So, I wanted to, just for the people who don't know, we met through Esalen and got into some work with Mikey Siegel, and I wanted to get into a little bit about, because I dug around, what you told me about your website, and it seems like you have an affinity for creative forms of biofeedback, biohacking, and artistic endeavors that interface with our minds and bodies. I mean, is that somewhat accurate?
Oh, yeah, I think that's pretty topical. I've been sort of, I live in these two worlds. I live in this world of biomedical equipment design and also, the artistic expression of such. And so the vernacular is interesting. On the art side, I consider the work that I do there to be a kind of artistic practice that involves, it involves participants really, and so the participant themselves become part of the ultimate creation, and then depending on who's participating, it can vary actually. The results can vary. Results can vary. So,
what's kind of the goal you have though with the participation, and is it to engender some kind of state, or is it more of just a creative expression?
Well, the goal here really is a kind of exploration into the phenomena when it comes to people and their, the things that make us human. Like, what are the qualities that occur in people that allow us to come to judgment? So, for instance, as we're talking here on this, device, right? So we're, many hundreds of miles apart, but nevertheless, the data is coming to me and it's going to you over these wires, and then you're hearing it. And then this data is kind of coming into your, brain through the ears, and mostly ears now because the video is not working. And so then it registers in there in your brain, and then it bounces around in there for about a half a second. And during that time, there's a kind of physiologic expression in your body that might be very subtle. It depends, kind of a bit related to probably what I'm saying, but it could be a very subtle kind of response, like maybe a change in pupil dilation or heartbeat or a respiratory rate or something like that. And maybe if I said something that reminded you of something, like maybe a particular, joyful or traumatic event that you might have experienced in your past, the response might be stronger. And so these things lead to a kind of feeling state in the body that then our conscious processes, are what I should say, more not conscious, but are processes that allow us to form opinions. These kind of higher level cognitive processes. This sort of emotional substrate data allows these higher, the kind of more complicated processes that allow us to come to opinions about things. They allow those to happen, and so it's a kind of early look at the kind of data processing ability that we have, and so it's a kind of the art that I'm working on allows it permits a kind of voice to be given to these physiological signals that underlie our ability to come to judgment. And so maybe what I could do is give an example. So there's a project I'm working on now called Biometric Campfire. And so it's 6 individuals that sit in these campfire chairs. And the chairs are outfitted with physiological monitors. And in particular here, what we're doing is looking at just the electrocardiogram of each individual. So kind of the heartbeat, like the electrical signal made by your heart. And then there are aspects that in our bodies that speed up the heart or slow down the heart, depending on whether we need to have a sympathetic response to what's going on or a parasympathetic response. And so it's a kind of thing, we're not really actually sort of fully often consciously aware of this process, but it's a precursor state that definitely affects our judgment. Like if we're in an activated state and our heart's beating up, then the thoughts that the way that the kind of opinions that we might come to in that state are different than if maybe our heart's sort of slowing down. And so an example there is let's say you're really upset and your heart's pounding and you're writing a letter to somebody that you're really upset about, and then maybe you wait a day and write that letter then, and the differences between those two letters, and that it could be, in a way, indexed almost by the changes in the behavior of one's heart during those two time periods, or two compared time periods. So anyway, the biometric campfire, what it does is it gives a kind of voice to this data in a group setting, and then so you feel your own heartbeat in each chair, and then you also see a representation of your heartbeat in this kind of central pillar, which behaves like a deconstructed campfire. And so you see your relationship as a kind of photonic energy, so like a light pulse appears in this fire that is yours, and also the other 6 people or the other 5 people also have their own light pulse that's associated with it. And then there's a kind of average signal that is also created that looks at kind of the temperament of the whole group from this physiologic perspective. And so you see a kind of like signal, or like a kind of, it's sort of like an electric fire that bounces around, much like a real fire, but it's sensitive to the physiologic state of the group. So if the group synchronizes in its heart rate, which sometimes it does, then the fire gets bigger and brighter, and if it desynchronizes, it gets less. And it just sort of goes through this kind of random walk, much like a real fire, but it's driven by the source physiology. So there's this kind of photonic expression of the individual and group physiology in the fire. And so, and then the other thing it does, this project is it creates a musical composition, so that each person in the circle is sitting in a chair, and that chair has a note of a particular instrument assigned to it. And in this case, it's the note of a zither, but it can be changed. And then as the heartbeat occurs, the note of the zither is played. And then the magnitude of the note, or the loudness of the note, is kind of the loudness of the heartbeat. And then the rhythm of the note is the rhythm of the heartbeat. And what the whole project does is it creates a kind of melody that's based on the instrument of the zither, that is a function of sort of the physiology, the combined and individual physiology of the group. So in this particular case, you've got 6 people sitting together, and they're creating a musical composition and a kind of visual composition that's strictly a function of their body's physiology before they come to judgment, basically. And so it's a kind of, in a way, sort of an unconscious, like it's an exploration into what would it mean to be creative if the conscious mind, in a way, or the cognitive processes were not involved. Like what's the contribution of the unconscious mind to creative expression?
It's sort of like a body consciousness,
exactly.
Mind, personification of that.
Exactly, yeah, like a body consciousness that, but before, like, let's say somebody's playing the piano or something, and there's, if you're trying to, let's say, create something new, like a composition, then, your mind's involved in order to move the skeletal muscles in your body, to manipulate the fingers, which press the key to create that note. And so there's a very different kind of process involved there, than it would be to simply measure the heart and extract data from the heart simply as it's beating. Right. But it also varies. So there's a kind of variation that the heart undergoes that doesn't really require it requires a very different kind of set of processes that occur in the body to move the heart around. And there's a kind of language associated with these things, like, the heart in a like you could say, in a way, like the language of the heart in this case. And this is a language that sort of sits. It's unlike the language that we're using here that during this interview, and it sort of sits below culture and skin color and and all that stuff. Like it's very kind of fundamental, and probably we don't really have very good words to describe this language. And so the point of this project was to try to give this language a voice, and it was just kind of a way of doing that by employing the other sensory frameworks that we have.
Have you thought of ways, or you found ways that another way of talking about this heart voice, or heart knowledge, intuition, perhaps, other ways for us to kind of tap into this beyond being, beyond. I mean, I like these artistic expressions and creative means of seeing it. That's always awesome. And I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of talk about body and mind in the wellness world, as if there's two minds, there's two consciousness, or two parts of our beingness that we're working to be in touch with. And I think that's something that people recognize. There's a lot of value to somehow getting in touch with more of their heart consciousness, which seems to be more of a witness state, more of a softness, and one that's less frenetic and less in the fear mode, and more connective and compassionate. But one often it has a lot of wisdom for us. So have you found any ways through this work or personally about tapping into that knowledge, into that space?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I guess the way I've kind of started to think of this, you mentioned this kind of idea of a witness state. That I think that's such a good word, really, for what's happening here. I think what this kind of art project, these sort of arts expressions allow, when you're kind of exposed to your physiology and the group and a kind of like community's physiology simultaneously. You become a kind of witness to the process, and you can sort of relax into that state a bit, actually. I mean, it's quite comforting, really. What I've experienced when people, it's a very new project, but what I've experienced when people sit in it is that they do tend to be very focused on what's happening sort of like right now, or just even what's happening just as the coming of now, kind of like very, very just, I don't know, it's a little trance-like. It's fascinating. I guess, this body-mind thing. So I think the way, like, people, I know it is common kind of like to sort of think of these things as being a bit separate. And I guess I've come to think of it as this this rolling towards judgment. So like this rolling towards the generation of opinion, which, then leads to expectation and kind of related ilk. But so you kind of have the precursor state, this sort of emotional affect state, which then creates a substrate, which allows then the coming to judgment to proceed. But it's a kind of moving window. So we're this sort of moving trajectory of constantly coming to judgment, opinions, the reaction, the reflection of our opinions back into the environment, which then permits us to have new physiological responses, which then encourage a new coming to judgment. And then it's this sort of window. So it's like, and I think our concept of like where the present actually is at this point where there's. So let me, like from a physiologic point of view, from like a neurophysiological point of view, like when we receive data that comes into our bodies through our eyes and our ears, it takes about 50 milliseconds for that data from audio data to come in and register in our brain, and it takes about 100 milliseconds for visual data to come in. And then that data, and because the audio data is a little faster, it's a little bit less complicated than visual data, so it comes in a little quicker. And then it takes about a half a second or so for that data to bounce around in the brain. And about the earliest we can come to an opinion about it is about 500 milliseconds, or about a half a second after it bounces around in there. And it might take about 3 seconds. And so then, after all that, we come to a kind of opinion about what happened. And then that opinion then will have an influence in terms of what future information we hope to receive, associated with this thing, or how we might choose to filter it in a way, or like, because we could turn our head away from what we're experiencing, or we could close our ears, or we could start talking, or any of these things that would then influence the environment that is allowing us to receive that, any new data again. And so there's a kind of recursive phenomena. So we hear we perceive the data, it bounces around in our brain, we have this physiologic expression. On the physiologic expression sits our coming to judgment. Our coming to judgment then influences our behavior in that environment. And so the where now is located, actually, like the exact moment of time of now, is kind of like right at that moment between the physiologic expression, probably, or somewhere in there, and the coming to judgment. Like that's probably where now is. And so in a way, the coming to judgment is a kind of sort of like it's sort of a little bit of it's speculative and not exactly now. And the physiologic data is really, it's kind of like probably represents our full awareness of the now, I guess.
Well,
so
it gets to questions of free will and whether we even have it, maybe, because it's sort of like, where's the truth astute. Of our being? Is it in the nanoseconds before we actually think we're making decisions, or when our body is reacting in a way without our minds cognitively choosing X, Y, Z? I mean, I also start to think about how technology or the coming of AI in different ways, and how it is interacting with our minds and our heart minds, and what kind of choices we are making with that, and how it's amplifying our consciousness and our connection or lack thereof. Because I would assume, one of your modes of doing this artistic work is not just to kind of give expression to that, but you're talking about there's a form of group connection. There's a connection, deepening some kind of connection to yourself and your own inner process and your mind and your heart. And there's this interaction with these other people. So inherently, it's about how it all comes together in a group. Is that part of it too?
Oh, completely, yeah. The first work in this area was very individual, and so it was just you experiencing your own heartbeat, and then there was a kind of creative expression there too. But I work in these. I've been involved with these kind of collaborative art enterprises for a long time, and so with Fishbone, a 501c3 based in Santa Barbara, and then also more recently SBCAS, the Santa Barbara Center for Art, Science, and Technology. And so there's very different kinds of things that can happen, for individual, when you're kind of working solo versus kind of working in a group. And then, especially when it comes to this idea of kind of creative expression. And so this project was an attempt to kind of like think about the context of the group, from a physiologic point of view and the kind of expression that could happen in that context.
Yeah. Well, that's fun. I mean, it's kind of I know you've done a lot of these types of projects over the years, but I think what is at the forefront of what's going on has a lot to do with how we interface with technology physically and emotionally, because it's already happening in a sort of unconscious way with our hyper tactile lives. I think it could be interesting if developers bring more of this in, and because there's more and more options for us with technology of how we can kind of tweak ourselves and get information and biophysiological information. There's a lot of different directions it could go.
Exactly, and I think our choice to, for how we, I think this data actually, this physiologic data, is super. Like right now, when we work with our computer frameworks, if you're a designer or an architect or something like that, you're working on, let's say, a model of a house or a building, right, for a company or something, and so let's say it's a house, and you're working on these different rooms of the house, and then I'm just kind of presenting a thought experiment here.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's say you get to the foyer of the house, the entrance kind of, and what if the computer could tell that you were a little bit emotionally like you weren't feeling so great about it, like it wasn't something you could really communicate to the computer through the use of your mouse or your keyboard, but what if the computer was aware of your emotional state, tenor, affect, as you were working on the foyer, and could realize that you were sort of a bit frustrated, right, with what was going on. And then maybe
sounds like some 2001 HAL shit, and then it's like
exactly, yeah.
You need a sleeping pill, yeah.
Well, it's kind of, but I think it also kind of. I'm bringing it up because this is I think work that's very, it's very much within reach, and allows our results, actually, the things that we work on and the things that we care about, allows them to become more emotionally connected to us. Like we'd be less likely. Like we can find the more perfect answer, actually, by using strategies like this. And so because we can disguise so much of our emotional state when we use just the mouse and the keyboard. Like for instance, when you just send a text message, right, to someone, and how it can be interpreted a million different ways, that text, and right, depending on the context, and our imagination kind of fills in the blanks. And emoticons help, I think. They're kind of like an attempt to sort of get at this stuff, right. But there's a way to actually go deeper and be clearer. And if our computational frameworks were aware of our affective state, they could do things like, say, like in this case of this architect working on the foyer, the computer might suggest, well, how about you and I, we drop into an emotional motivational state resonance loop, and then I iterate on designs, and you can just perceive what's happening, and then I can see if there's a drift in your emotional state towards something that's more desirable. And then the computer might iterate through designs at about three designs per second, or a design per second, and then the architect could sit there and experience that, and then the computer might say, "Oh, I can see that you kind of like this direction a little bit more, and so why don't we settle on that basic idea, and then drop into the normal state where I just send the data to you, and then you think about it, and then you respond through the mouse or the keyboard."
But on one level, we're asking technology, or hoping that it can fill in the blanks for where we've already feel missing links that we've designed. For instance, we have technology to make communication easier, like video chatting, and it's pretty good for getting facial expressions and really feeling like you're with a person. But a lot of times we choose text because it's easier, shorter, we don't have to connect. But ironically, we're looking for that connection. That's what's driving a lot of these things. We're trying to make technology that can help us communicate our feelings, or maybe sense our feelings, to basically connect with the world. That's sort of what social media is. It just isn't that effective at it. It's effective at other things, like keeping our attention. And it'd be great if, authenticity and human connection and getting back to the basics that's in our DNA for hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions of years, of community and small tribes and seeing people and having meaningful interaction is really what we're yearning for deep down on some level. And we're trying to like back engineer through all sorts of technology and experiences and apps ways to feel what is sort of our birthright, which is just to like look in someone's eyes and you feel heard. And an emoji is like a vestige of that, a digital attempt of filling in the blanks.
Yeah, I think that's so spot on. That just really, that really is the deal, actually. I think that, where we are in this situation, right? A very unusual situation where there's, push 8 billion people on the planet. Yeah. And we're, and just from 1974 to 2025, we're going to double. We were 4 billion in 74 and 2025 will be 8 billion. And so that's the largest increase of human population ever to have occurred. There's 4 billion people in 50 years. And so, and then of course that's coupled with this sort of phenomenal growth of the web and all the energy that's used to create that, in addition to all the supporting infrastructure, the electrical systems infrastructure, the transportation infrastructure. And so what we're doing is we're burning up the metabolic resources of the planet, the oil, and we're burning that in order to support this sort of like extensive growth in these areas. And it kind of appears as though we're burning ourselves up, with global warming as a consequence of all this. And it's we need to become far more conscientious about what the hell it is we're doing. And
it's like the frog in the pot that slowly heats the water and doesn't realize it because it's slowly raising the temperature of the water around us.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And from a geologic perspective, it is like from a flash in the pan, like everything was fine and dandy up to 100 years ago. It's kind of gotten seriously wrong. And even that extremely high speed event that we're in, this sort of the Anthropocene, right? This sort of potentially sixth extinction event, even though we're right flat dab in the middle of that, we still can't actually viscerally. The people that study this are viscerally aware of it, and the people that think about it are aware of it. But I think that just we're not actually fully viscerally aware of it because of the speed. It's still too slow for the human nervous system to comprehend, and that's
which is crazy.
It's crazy.
It's actually totally, it's so obvious. This is nothing. It has nothing to do with like whether you believe in greenhouse gases being the effect of. I don't even know if I want to say believe, but it's more like our sense of separation from the Earth itself, and this old idea that the Earth is here for us to spoil and to use to our however we like, and damn the consequences. Like it's like filling up the ocean with garbage and plastic. Getting a cup of the ocean and having these particles of plastic in every single drop. That to me is a tragedy, whether or not we can continue civilization with that in our face, which we probably can't. Like the hubris that, we can do this, we can do that. It doesn't really affect like the greater system whole. Everything affects the greater system whole, as we always find out. But there's this attitude that we can transcend with more technology, and what's missing there is that aspect of love for what is us, which is the world and everything we get from it. We are it. We're sitting here I'm made of it as much as you are, as much as my iPhone is made of the earth too. And it's just kind of a crazy disconnect in human psychology that we have to have tragedy to change, especially collective tragedy. Like no one wants to be the one to suffer intentionally when there's still like a dance and singing going on the deck of the Titanic. They're like, well, then why should I jump ship first? And obviously there are many, many people on this planet who are mourning it and taking action, but driven by industry. That's really, the big show in town is 80%, I think, or more of basically our consumption comes from making shit and energy systems and all that stuff. But Not to simplify like the climate crisis, but I do think that like technology, and it's related to what we're talking about, because that attitude that we're going to invent our way out of it may work in the short term, but the deeper wound is our own disconnect from what we are and who we are, and maybe this sort of heart mind that you're speaking to, and our natural connection that maybe we're not even fully realizing at times because we're interfacing with certain technologies or our lives that cover it up or aren't showing it to us. And it would be good if we're not going to get rid of the tech. So it's like it would be good if that tech we could integrate that into our systems more. Mm-hmm. It could teach us.
Yeah, I think so. I think that I think it's super important.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we are racing down a path of who knows what, but it's one that I think about a lot, just because even just the way I make music, it uses a lot of technology. Mm-hmm. But I know at the end of the day, that level of authenticity or the voice or a basic rattle and rhythm, these are the things that are the backbone of it all. Mm-hmm. How's that hot tub? I can hear it.
Oh, God.
I can hear it.
Just well, I'm just thinking.
Getting sous vide.
But a number of years ago, we, I think, all been aware of the kind of present cataclysm, that we're headed to, and that it feels like we're just part of right now. And at one point, I guess I was sort of thinking, well, like there's Edward Abbey, and he has this book called Earth Abides. And so humanity, we're these unfortunate primates, and we have these proclivities towards greed and self-absorption. And there's so many of us right now. And that, so we'll in a way sort of affect these carbon dioxide levels on the planet, and then will affect sort of significant change, and then maybe in some short period of time here we'll like wipe ourselves out, and then perhaps wipe most everything else out with us, but then the Earth will sort of perhaps in a way sort of recover over millennia, and then something new will happen. And there's some kind of like weird, strange sort of small solace, I think maybe I was taking in that idea, and then more recently I've become aware that this actually could not be the outcome at all. Is that we could actually take the planet, planet Earth, and turn it into something that's a little bit more like Venus, where it has, it's a kind of runaway effect where we actually create a situation where the planet becomes completely uninhabitable, like to the point of being at extremely high temperatures and unable to support life. And I came to that realization some years ago, and so it's just sort of, I feel like the stakes actually are very high, and that we just really, it's just super, super important for us to get our heads screwed on right about, and our bodies connected to our minds, and us connected to the earth and to each other, in a way that just hasn't, or in a way that maybe we can do it with 8 billion people,
Or if people just started having one child, it would balance out over 100 years. I think it would go down to like a few billion. It'd be much more manageable.
That's the if
no one has to die except naturally.
Yeah, if we could just hold it together, in a way, like.
Because then it's like you could keep using resources. Not that we should, but it'd only be like 1 billion or 2 people instead of 8 of them. And everything would just go down.
Yeah, it seems like the carrying capacity of the planet. Of course, this is a subject of some debate, but it appears it's roughly around a couple billion people. About 1/4 of where we're at now. That appears to be
at our consumptive levels. Yeah, like we could absolutely fit lots more people if we all lived in permaculture ways, for sure. There's a lot of land, and there are a lot of natural resources. We just use them in such a way that it just despoils our systems, and sort of our carbon-based life of basically blowing things up to make things happen, whether it's coal or oil or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, my hope is there's not some sort of Malthusian correction or massive die-off other than, like, I don't want to bring suffering. I know suffering is sort of why we're here, but you're kind of speaking to why I do what I do, and I always try to tread that line of helping people tap into that intuitive space, that space inside, and in that space there's often a place of connection to their greater world and community. And doing so in a way that I hope engenders more connection to the outside world and to themselves simultaneously. It's not just like a narcissistic exercise of digging into the self while blocking out what's really happening in the world. Because action is important, but that, we don't need a bunch of wounded healers going around who are just bringing their own shadow into the world in amplified ways, which... I don't know. I really feel like something has to happen from the inside out, as opposed to I don't see a top-down solution coming from the outside in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's right. I think that the kind of number one task really is to if we were somehow able to communicate sort of what was happening environmentally, like there's sort of these spheres of human caring, like when it comes to any of us. And so like when you wake up in the morning and maybe put on your clothes and the things that you decide to put on and wear, and then if you're living your apartment or wherever it is you're living, or maybe you're living in a yurt in Mongolia or whatever, and kind of like, well, what's the state of affairs in my place where I'm living, and what needs to be straightened, and then there's this kind of thought about, well, the place I'm living is resident in a larger community, and then maybe if we're driving a vehicle or if we're taking a subway, like what do we care about the subway that we're in, and there's a kind of pretty steep drop off in these spheres of caring, and they're very related to proximity. So, the things that are closest to us, that we've known the longest, are the things we care about the most, and the things that are further away that we care about the least. And there are provisions, I think, to be able to help this, to expand this reach of human caring. And it's a kind of, and this is where technology can be helpful, is to allow the technology to allow us to better see the world as though it was extremely close to us. And this can be quite difficult in an urban setting, which is where most of the people are living now on the planet. I think just turned a couple of years ago, where the majority of people are living in urban environments, and so these are environments of thought and not so much of nature. And so there's a real importance in trying to have natural phenomena, the natural environment, connect in a way that we all fully get, the same way that we would be connected if we were walking in the middle of a forest or something. And there's a kind of and in particular when it comes to things like the climate change that we're experiencing, like we relate well to like an earthquake or maybe an exploding volcano, because it's occurring at the same speed that our nervous systems occur at. And so if we could somehow convey the speed of the global warming phenomena, even though to some people it appears as though, like they're still questioning whether or not it could exist. I mean, I hear that. And then, but if you look at the record, of course, it becomes intuitive. It becomes obvious that it is happening extremely fast. Mm-hmm. But still, like on a deep, deep intuitive level, like if we could somehow convey this in a way that was as clear as our relationship to our children or our very good friends or the clothes that we wear or any of those things, that we truly viscerally understood it as affecting our health and livelihood, I think that we would change. And I think we just are in a position to kind of block it out, because it's a little bit, there's a conceptual leap, I think, maybe, or other things dominate, like our sense of self-preservation or or
Right. And
our feelings of greed or whatever kind of like become strong enough to allow us to sort of forget how important it is or how
I
relevant.
wonder how much of it's generational too. I mean, if that's a saving grace, just time going by and generations evolving, I'm not sure. But people, it's always easier to work with is in front of you, and it's not really a bad thing to start there. I mean, if you start treating yourself and your neighbors and your community in a more positive fashion, I would hope that would start to bleed out in certain ways. But I don't know, it definitely gets into human psychology, which is complex.
Yeah. Human psychology and our sensory frameworks and our propensity for self-preservation and our willingness to experience, our willingness to head to fear and.
Well, in the ways that we're messing with our sensory experiences in the last 10 years, the iPhone's now 10 years old, and I think that was a seismic shift in humanity. And I don't really think we fully grokked what that is doing or has done, or even really we're really headed with it. There's whether or not you put AI into the picture, but we're really at an interesting time of deep change that we're sort of largely aware of, and there's a lot of it under the surface where we're not really sure its effects or what's going on or even what we're doing with all these tools. But we're just kind of moving forward full force. And it's an amazing time of innovation and sort of connection. Like we're hyper connected, but also disconnected in very fundamental ways.
Yeah, both are happening at the same time. And I think there is a kind of potential salvation there through our connectivity. Mm-hmm. And there were plenty of warnings about it, starting with Marshall McLuhan and perhaps earlier about the global, what he coined the global village, where when he perceived this, when Sputnik went up, and he said that the entire world was going to become kind of like a village where no matter who is speaking, we'd all have to listen to it. And whether or not they made any sense,
That's Twitter.
And, yeah, Twitter, exactly. That's a very good, it's like the public stocks, right, on Twitter. Yeah. So I know, and we just have to do the best we can, I think.
Well, you do. I mean, underneath it all, I sense some optimism from you, and I also sense a certain level of distance from witnessing it over the years. But, creating art like you're doing, or myself creating art, is sort of one response to this, because we're trying to speak to something that's more nuanced and larger and a bigger than us, and only really creative expression can do that at the end of the day. It's a reflection and a mirror, hopefully, of these sort of complex things going on behind the scenes and just the mystery itself. And it's important to have that as a reflection.
I think so. I think I've attended a couple of your performances, Trevor, and there's a kind of language that you're using too that sort of sits outside of spoken kind of like the what we normally use to communicate, like our texting and stuff, and we're trying to almost you're it's a kind of reaching, right, for like how do we do it? How do you try to communicate a sort of something that's very, very critical to people in a way they can really understand, that promotes lasting change, that is helpful for all of us.
Yeah, it's probably many things, right? If we focus on our own gifts and what we have to give, I know for me, I hope that it's like planting a certain seed or a certain felt experience that is important to them and powerful. So I aim just to make it as powerful as I can, but while still something that's going to work for a broader range of people. And I'm speaking mostly about my ceremony live experience that I've been developing and performing. I'm just really working to think about how can I have something that's a doorway that almost anyone could walk into, despite their backgrounds, and they can have a felt experience that hopefully is going to bring them closer to themselves and making positive choices for themselves, and whatever is being planted beyond that is sort of beyond me. It's like I'm opening a doorway to spirit and intuitive universal knowledge that I'm not in control of, and I'm not the one pressing down the dogma. I would hope that they're coming up with their own inside, and that's my own trust that there's some kind of greater force of love, if you wish to call it, that I'm in service to as well, and I need just as much as anybody else. But God help us if it's not there. But my heart knowledge tells me it is, and so we just have to, I don't know, do what we think is right.
I think it is there. It just needs the right circumstance. We need lots of reminders, I think.
Lots, yeah. Well, we're fighting something at the same time, which is distraction and suffering and everything that's going on. Like you said, in the face of what's really occurring right now, it's such a strange time. So there's a lot of juxtaposition.
Yeah, it's hard to keep your balance.
Yeah, so we need inspiration, and we also need some shocking into sobriety at times. And I mean, I can't say what the perfect recipe is, but being in a hot tub like yourself, that sounds like a good start.
So you caught me at this moment, but
it's a great moment.
Yeah, well, there's adversity too, and pleasure, and I don't know. It's quite a mix. The world, it's quite a mix.
Well, hey man, I enjoyed talking. And how can people kind of look at some of these things you're talking about and dig into your work? Is it through your website the best?
Yeah, probably. That's a good one. So that's just ALANMACY and then .com. That's it.
AlanMacy.com.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, hey man, I wish I could join you there in Santa Barbara, but I'll have to wait till my next journey that direction. I think I'm heading somewhere else. I think east next. So.
Thank you, Trevor. Really a pleasure speaking to you. I look forward to connecting again.
Thanks, man. All right, folks, there you go. Thank you, Alan Macy, for giving us your time. I really enjoyed that conversation, and I was jealous that I couldn't sit in the hot tub with him or have a hot tub at that point in time. This music you are hearing is called Inside, and it's from the album Music to Die To, and its sister record, Music to Be Born To. Don't be afraid of music to die to. It's music or music to be born to. Really, it's sort of either or, right? It's sort of one and the same thing, different sides of the coin, the same energy of life and creation. And that album is pretty close to my heart. It's all music from a psilocybin ceremony, actually, that was improvised on the spot and created from the energy of that moment. So I think it carries a special channel in it, and it's quite effective for a lot of things, and that's just one of the songs that came out, and I hope you enjoy it. You can find that anywhere you listen to music, including eastforest.org. And eastforest.org, that's also where you can find all those tour dates and stuff. And hey, did you know in the merch section, if you hit the merch thing, we've added those scents, my East Forest perfume oils. I know that sounds a little weird, but it's actually something I got kind of into. I'm very into smells, and I use them in the ceremony concerts that I've been doing. And you can get them now online. There's 2 of them. Toad Lick, that I wear every day, and Angel's Rest. I wear that too sometimes, but I'd say it's a bit more feminine. But they're both really stunning and unique. Give them a shot. Give them a try. All right, kids. Hope to see you on the road. Colorado, November 8th through 11th. Durango, Denver, Grand Junction. Esalen Institute, Big Sur, California, November 16th through 18th. Blah, 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 blah. I love you. I'll talk to you soon. East Forest signing out. Keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit, but when you do, you know what to do. You do it with grace. inside.